the regenerative agriculture is a process and not a thing, right? So you can define it, but ultimately it has to be the farmer working in a system that's integrated into the environment, that is supportive of soil life, that actually you want soil as a foundation for any regenerative agricultural practice that's full of life and in the right balance and function to support your plants.
Hallo liebe Leute, willkommen wieder zur zweiten Soilify Interviewstaffel. Ich habe heute Matthew Slaughter mit mir von earthfort. How I like to introduce you to people is like you're my mentor on thinking principles, practical philosophy and holistic science. And fortunately you are working also with the soil.
Yes.
So you're working with farmers,
yes,
which is really inspiring to look deeper at for me, in the sense of I'm coming from an academic realm, looking for nutritious food, how to get better in my health, and then meeting you, looking deeper into soil and how to help farmers to farm better. And I'll like to have a conversation with you about regenerative agriculture, how to spread the word about that into the world in a very practical manner, and also from a very experienced level, which you have with 20 years of experience in working with farmers.
Yeah.
And for the start, I would like to have you introduce yourself.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So my name is Matt Slaughter. I am the president and founder of earthfort, which is a company in Corvallis, Oregon. And we do soil microbiology testing and also education. And also we've created some products. So to help farmers achieve regenerative agricultural approach. In biological approach, we do life first. So earthfort's slogan is soil brought to life. And for 20 years, like you said, I've been doing this around the world. Most recently, I've been to Kenya and Uganda. I also do work in Haiti. I've been to Ukraine, Israel, Australia, all throughout Central and South America. Of course, working here in Germany with the farmers, hopefully more than we've been. And of course, the United States. I have clients all over the United States that we work with. And many of the work that I do is really meant to help a farmer understand processes and learn, because you asked, what is regenerative agriculture? Well, that depends. It depends. The answer to that question depends on the farmer. It depends on what they're trying to achieve and where they're at in a process, and really look at it as a process of practices, a process of change. So it's a scary word for a lot of farmers. So as a consultant and as a laboratory, as a company that really is committed to helping people with that change process. It's about risk management and learning to adopt practices that will help them. So for me, a basic kind of definition of regenerative would be that the soil itself is healthy, in other words, alive, with the bacteria, fungi, other microbes, and functional, And so part of the science of what we do with holistic science is to understand, and this is a big principle that a lot of people don't realize, but I've been teaching it for 20 years. It's normal for me, but plants don't grow because of the fertilizer you put on the ground. Plants grow because of the microbes that feed them. And the way science has approached some agricultural practices is to kind of force plants to grow by putting nutrients into the system and force feeds them to grow. NPK fertilizers, inorganic fertilizers, are designed to force the plant to grow. But in nature, and a natural process and an integrative system that's functional, nobody feeds the forest. Nobody's fertilizing the forest. So why can't we use that concept in our farms? Why can't we bring the idea of the microbes pulling nutrients out of the soil and feeding the plants so that we get the growth that we're looking for with reduced inputs? They don't have to eliminate it, it's still human managed. So we still have to take care of some things, and to create healthier plants, in the process. Because then when the microbiology feeds the plants, they get all the nutrients, not just the NPK. They get micronutrients, trace minerals, and all those things that actually make the food taste better and make it more nutritious. So that's again, hard to define regenerative ag, but healthy soil is the beginning of that process.
What's inspiring as well to hear, to have the farmers put first, that it's all about the well-being of a farmer. Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate more on that, how you put that into practice with your work?
The farmer is my client, right? And my focus on the agriculture, my knowledge base comes from the soil and the practices and things that go into helping build the soil. But it has to come, the farmer has to be really involved. And it's all about the farm. It's about the farmer. And if we don't do it with the farmer's needs first, then it doesn't matter what we do with the soil, because if they're not into it, or if the economics aren't good, if it costs more than what they're currently doing to do it, then that's not necessarily good economics for the farmer. Why would they do that? So we try and make sure that the farmer is happy with the process, that they move at their own pace. So it's a relationship that we try and build with the farmer and help them navigate the process of what they want to accomplish. So I always talk to them first. What do you want? What do you need? What are your problems, challenges? What are your hopes? So that way we build a system and help them, basically give them the tools they need to build their own approach and their own system. And we just share knowledge, and if they need products or if they need equipment, we help them with finding that as well. So it's always about making sure that they're happy and comfortable with the whole approach, and that it makes sense for them. Because if it doesn't, then why would they do it? So it has to be from that angle.
Which makes sense intuitively. It's just to really focus on the one who has to do the change.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Also, what inspired me as well to think about is having the foundation of society in a stable economy. Mm-hmm. It would be interesting also, as we want to reach the consumers with this kind of interviews as well, just to explain from your point of views, why is it important as society to look into agriculture?
Yeah. So the economy, ecology, they're connected. And ecology is connected to the farm, right? And so the foundation of all of our activities really is agriculture. No matter what you look at, we're pulling nutrients and resources out of the ground for food. We also do it when we're mining for things, minerals and other types of deposit. It all comes from the earth, and we're connected to the earth. And so we want to be, it's important to realize that, right? The agriculture is, if without food, without good food, you don't have good people. Right? I mean, basically, we want to be healthy and we want to be secure, right? So food security, of course, is a big issue for a lot of people. And having a source of sustainable food, organic food, hopefully, or at least nutrient-dense food, right? That's a big part of it. And potentially it could become the foundation for our medical industry. What you are what you eat is something they often will say. So I think ultimately agriculture should be the foundation and the cornerstone of our whole economy. Everything else kind of rides on it. If you're not well fed, then what good is the technology? For example, what good is a cell phone if you can't get a meal? Which is why I work in Africa so much. So, because they have cell phones, but they don't have food.
It's kind of really paradox.
Yeah, it's a little backwards, and not backwards in the sense of like any kind of wrong. It's just opposite of the way it should be, Yeah.
Now it's the time to turn it around and to inspire people to really look at changing perspectives.
Yeah.
And taking the right actions. What do you see? What do you see is for a person who is living in a city? What are right steps to take to go more into the way of looking the interconnection, or having this seeing the interconnection between their own lives and the ecology on a farm?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that there's a lot of farm to table type of things where you get to know your farmer, right? If you go to farmers markets or buy from a local producer that even in the big city, you're usually not that far away from an agriculture center. And so learning about who your farmer is and where your food comes from, I think is really valuable. And and there's so much stuff online too, and then just learning about where it comes from and getting to know and making choices as a consumer, making choices that support, is this organic? Is it sustainable? Is it coming from a farm that really cares about what they're doing, or is it just coming from maybe a big corporate industrial farm?
And the rain is there again.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's just water. Water is important.
Really important.
Yeah.
We talked about this before this day as well, about the climate itself and how where to put a focus and how we can have a real influence on what problems we see in the world. For example, also on the topic of climate change.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to hear your perspectives or to get into discussion about it. How can we really make a positive impact also on how to also on climate change, because you can see it differently.
Yeah. So, I mean, right now it's very political, the whole climate change issue, but I don't see it as a political problem myself, other than how some people are handling it. I think, though, that what's really important for me and my perspective and the way I work with the farmers specifically is to build resilience, right? So things are changing. They're not the same as they were, and every year it keeps throwing us different loops. So being flexible. So as a farmer, to be flexible with, okay, we had a late, wet, cold spring in where I'm from in Oregon. Other places are coming out of a few years of drought, or maybe going into a third or fourth or fifth year of drought. So learning to manage water is a big part of the whole process. So building the soil so that it can hold more water and also control the flow of water through the farm, building better irrigation systems, and growing varieties of plants, keeping the ground covered so that you protect the soil. So from a practical perspective, I don't engage in cause and effect with climate change too much. I mean, I can if you want, but the real issue is how are the farmers going to build the resilience and adaptability to manage it, because it could be different every year, which is terrifying in a lot of cases for a farmer to have to think that they can't do the same thing year after year the same, right? And so that's part of our process, is also to help them understand the spectrum of tools and create adaptability so that they don't have to worry so much about, the climate's changing, how am I going to manage it, instead of who am I going to blame, or how am I going to change this. You know, there's all kinds of things that people are suggesting you could do to minimize or potentially, look at human activity that is contributing to it. I'm not a climate denier, but so the climate is changing.
It is.
And it's real obvious that things are getting warmer in some places, but in other places they're getting more extreme winters and shorter growing cycles. So we got a lot of changes. Climate change is also agriculture change, right? So we got to be adaptable. That's the main message for the farmers, is learn how to take care of the farm in a more flexible way.
And stepping out of the fear of future, which is what I see in climate. A lot of people talking about climate change, that they're kind of feared about future, and give them hope, and also the tools available that they can adapt it, and they can be flexible on their farm and adapt to the circumstances and the challenges they're facing. You have a perspective for future to act on, because if you're in fear, your nervous system is like, what to do now?
No, absolutely. I don't see it as it's a cause for concern. Humans need to survive. So, but I think, again, accepting the reality that things are changing, and then moving into a place of how am I going to adapt to it. That's really what's important. Let the politicians figure out who, what, when, where, and why. as far as like why is it climate change, that's somebody else's opinion, But I think we just create adaptability.
I know it's a topic of upset, but also we talked about this in this interview series as well, about carbon certificates.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Okay.
So just to
go there.
Get your opinion on that.
Yeah. So there's an idea that the soil can sequester carbon, and if you farm the soil in a particular way, you can build up the carbon storage. And there are people trading their bad habits for a farmer's good habits. They call it carbon credit or carbon certificates. And I honestly believe it's just displacement. It's allowing large corporations or large industries to continue doing things that they want to do without actually addressing their role in carbon release into the environment, and then putting it on the farmer to sequester carbon in the soil, which is I think misleading. I think there's there's a lot of people who say that the soil can sequester a lot of carbon, and it's true, but they're missing a point that the carbon cycle is constantly in motion, and the amount of carbon that's required to be sequestered, the soil, I don't think is the answer. Certainly we can do better things and do better on the farm, hold on to more carbon, because more carbon in the soil, more organic matter in the soil creates better habitat for the microbes, so the microbes can do their job better, which is help grow our plants better. But as far as being a serious carbon sink, I think that there's a a lot of more questions than answers as far as like what's that really look like on an agricultural field as opposed to like a forest full of trees. Yeah.
I know we have talked about this before, and it's important to look at the core of a problem if you want to solve it. So when we're looking at about the discussion on the emissions and that there is too much resources spent.
Oh, yeah.
And then so that's probably the main topic to talk about, how we manage our resources.
Yeah. Well, I am a big fan of less consumption in general terms. I think overconsumption, especially in the West, is, North America and Europe as well, where it's a lot of waste. It's a lot of wasteful use of, we're burning fossil fuels to move our cars around. We're creating huge amounts of plastic and plastic waste, and we're just over-consuming everything. And I think that that people, including myself, because I admit I'm guilty of this as well, is to work on consuming less resources on a regular basis, because then we'll have more into the future. If we need less, then there's more for the parts of the world that need it. And we don't take as much out of the ground, we don't put as much into the atmosphere. And, CO2 in the atmosphere is only one component of the problem. And there's a lot of other things that are going into the atmosphere that are contributing potentially from human activity. CO2 and carbon has just become the kind of the indicator, right? It's an indicator, but it's not the only culprit. And there's a lot of things that we do that could also be changed that reduce nitrous oxide emissions and other types of things. And methane is another one that can contribute to that. So there's a lot of, I think, overconsumption. I think we need to become more Zen-like. And just use less.
The question behind that for me is, what do I really need?
Yeah.
And to really ask that question, what to do with the farmers? Mm-hmm. What do I really need? What I'm hoping for in the future? What kind of resources do I really need to get where I want to go? Yeah. And then this whole, of course, when you're looking at the emissions in, like also the nitric oxide, for example, it's nitrogen that could be feeding the plant, so that's kind of lost for nothing in a sense. So that's what I'm thinking. Okay, how can we use these resources better for growing the plant and having nourish ourselves then, or animals, to close the loop.
Yeah, well, the loop can never be closed, because it's, the living earth is always, it's a closed loop essentially, except that all that energy that we use comes from the sun, and that eliminates the opportunity for a closed loop, because we need the sunlight energy for the whole thing to work. Even fossil fuels are basically sunlight energy that have been stored. They're the deepest Mother Earth I can think of. Yeah. That's right. So, but certainly thinking about how we're consuming things and looking at, really it's an environmental and ecology, it's the whole habitat of the earth and how humans are integrated into it, and looking at that in a way that says, what is our contribution? What is our role? And can we reintroduce ourselves into the natural cycles instead of trying to control it? Learn to work with it.
There's music playing.
Yeah. Nice. So, little music in the background there.
Yeah. The most important part to acknowledge that we're part of nature.
Part of nature.
Part of nature.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have to the disconnect from our natural world is a process that's been going on for 200-300 years now, where we've been slowly industrialization and the modern approach to non-objective science are becoming distant from nature, that nature's something out there and that we're something here. That, I think, is a lot of the problems that we're facing, is that we are not capable of separating ourselves from nature. But when we try, then we run into some problems. There's consequences for our actions in doing that. I think that's why it's so important. So many people are trying to reconnect with nature, reconnect with their own role in the natural world, And, it doesn't have to be go run into the woods for a week with like what is it, some of those programs, Naked and Afraid or something like that. You don't need to do that, but go for a walk in the woods. There's parks. Just reconnect. Go say hello to a tree. I'm not, I like trees. They're friendly. They don't yell at you. That's for sure. So
or say hi to a human being.
Well, they say hi to you in their own way. And. There's some trees in my neighborhood that I like to visit on a regular basis because they're just magnificent. We have actual redwoods growing in our neighborhood, so I can go visit these huge trees. Talk about carbon sequestering. See some of these trees, but connecting with nature is just really is important. We need to find that. I think human beings are looking for a sense of happiness, and one of the things that makes us happy is to feel connected to something greater than ourselves. And nature is definitely one of those things that is greater than us, greater than human, is the natural world, and it's not political. So you don't have to. It doesn't matter where you're from or what your ideas are. It's nature. It doesn't care. Doesn't care what your political party is or your religion or anything. It just is, and we're part of it. And if we can connect to that, I think that's one step in finding that happiness that I think we all crave. That connection,
Mm-hmm.
So
more happy. More happy human beings on the earth.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be great.
Might stop shooting each other.
Would be a good start, definitely. Then also going back to the farmers and the happy farmer. Okay, that's a goal, to have more happy farmers.
Yeah, I think so.
Looking at the suicidal rate for farmers, it would be interesting to make the shift happening.
Yeah.
We have to look at several layers for the political realm, for the scientific realm. Also working directly with the farmers and making the connections to the ones who eat the food and who also are in the area where the farmers are. For a farmer, what do you see are the most important questions they should ask themselves? And think, because we know both that it's about thinking and asking yourself the right questions to go into the right direction.
Yeah.
What do you see as important questions a farmer should ask himself or herself?
That's a really interesting question. I think, the question is always, what am I, how am I going to take care of my family, right? How do I care for my family? That should be always the first question that anybody asks themselves, is how do I take care of my immediate family, my community? So it's the interconnectedness and the relationship with other humans. And then how is my farm impacting the environment? How does my farm impact my children, right? And the animals that I'm working with, because there's a lot of studies that show some of these tools that we currently use on the farm could be hazardous to life. In the U.S. especially, they're starting to find evidence that it's causing issues with memory in the farmers and things like that. And so asking the questions of how is what I'm doing impacting that which is around me? Not just am I getting the best yield I can get, but do I have a healthy farm? Are my animals healthy? Is the food that I'm growing healthy? How is it affecting my family and my neighbors and the people that are buying my food or buying the crops that I'm growing? Is it is it actually making a difference, or is it contributing to a problem instead of helping solve a problem? And those are hard questions to ask. And I don't make any, it's a hard question for anybody to ask. Every morning I get up and I say, okay, how am I going to make myself and the world a better place? And every night when I go to bed, I think, did I help make the world a better place, or did I totally botch it? And I'd say, I'll be honest, I like a good night's sleep. So I really try and make sure that I made a good difference in the world, because that helps me sleep at night. If I've created a problem or something, I don't sleep as well. So I'm very highly motivated by a good night's sleep and being happy. And I think those are things that any human being could certainly help them find a path towards happiness.
That it's possible to be happy, and it's okay just to show happiness. It's also important to acknowledge.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stress in life, mm-hmm. a lot of stressors. Money's a stressor. Sending your kids to school is a stress. Farming, is it going to rain or is the sun going to shine today? I don't know. And that can be stressful depending on the time of year and what you're farming and how you're doing things. And so it becomes finding ways to manage the stress and work through it and be creative. I think that we often forget about our intuitive, creative side. We just stay focused on the analytical. I got to get this done, and I got to be here at a certain time, and all these really rigid approaches to things. And Americans, I'm the worst. I live by the clock, and so knowing that and then managing that and my own expectations is important. To say every once in a while you just need to stop and breathe and say, okay, it's okay. I don't need that stress, and it's not that big of a deal.
That's where my hope lies in connecting regenerative agriculture with the regenerative medicine approaches that are evolving, that it's okay to take care about your health, and we have their principles at hand and methods in hand that really can help you to gain perspective on your own health, to also seeing a spectrum of health mm-hmm. in human beings, that we will and can get better over time, of course, with the normal fluencies of life and getting better and worse, but all the perspective is to get better.
Yeah.
So going back to regenerative agriculture, as we know, it's a term that's pretty known, and it's getting more known also in Germany. Yeah. And we want to, with Soilify, to give it the broadest term possible, that it can be individual, understood, and also having the ground laid up for agriculture that can move dynamically to wherever we want as humans want to go. So it would be interesting to hear your perspective on then how to do that, and what you say about the principles already evolved for regenerative agriculture that we know of.
Yeah. So it's another interesting question, because you see, the regenerative agriculture is a process and not a thing, right? So you can define it, but ultimately it has to be the farmer working in a system that's integrated into the environment, that is supportive of soil life, that actually you want soil as a foundation for any regenerative agricultural practice that's full of life and in the right balance and function to support your plants. And the outcome of that, of just that alone, just the soil component, is potentially the less need for inputs, organic or inorganic or anything. It reduces that a lot if the soil is functional. It also allows the plants to create its own protection, so you don't need as much chemicals for pesticides and things like that. The whole idea is that the soil, the farm, and the environment become integrated together and operate in a more natural way. the practices that are currently, the main practices that are currently out there are really, really fine. Cover cropping in all of its variety, because there's a lot of different types of practices associated with cover crops. It's not just a cover crop. Sometimes it's a cash crop. Sometimes it's a fertilizer. Sometimes it's just ground cover. So those are a good tool to keep the soil protected at all times, keep it covered, so so that there's living roots in a living system all the time, even when you're not necessarily growing the primary plant that you're trying to harvest. There's also proper rotation, and if you're working with animals, how to move them through the system in a way that preserves that soil. So we get to, basically we get to start managing the soil actually more than we manage the crop. The last piece is, of course, the tilling of the soil. And conservation tilling is my preferred approach to the whole question of conservation tilling, whether to no-till or not no-till. I think that also is a spectrum of, it's a tool, and there are levels and gradients of how to use that tool best, and it depends on the farmer. So ultimately, I think that regenerative agriculture is a knowledge base of tools that helps the farmer integrate the farm into the natural environment so that it can function in as low an impact as possible, right? That's the main thing. Any other definition is, I'm sure people have all kinds of ideas of how to define it, but I think ultimately the farmers themselves have to define what regenerative means to them. A lot of my clients are hybrid systems where they use some small amounts of chemicals and practices, and they balance it and create this more sustainable, less of an impact on the farm by utilizing all the tools. So in some cases, and not to be specific, but this a hot topic is glyphosate, right? So using small amounts of glyphosate maybe once at the beginning of a growing season to help with the crop to get established may be a better choice than tilling the ground, right? To cultivate the weeds. But in other cases, that may be not the right choice, and the light cultivation may be a good choice. So it really does come down to what is the farmer's needs, what's the physical, chemical, and biological properties of their soil, and what are they trying to accomplish, and what problems are they actually trying to solve. So the other part of the whole equation in regenerative is the farmer needs to know a lot more about the farm. They need to understand the problems that they're dealing with at a deeper level. And instead of saying, I have a weed, I need to spray an herbicide, the question is, why is the weed there? And what can I do to discourage that weed? Or why is my crop not producing? It's not because of lack of fertilizer, but my crop may not be producing because why? And really look into it. So utilizing testing, experience, and the whole toolbox.
What I feel is also important to add the perspective on the question, why is the weed there? And that you phrase it quite very nicely for the plant. It's the plant expressing the milieu where it's growing pretty good. It's right there, where it's at the right point where it grows. And to ask the question, what is the habitat where it grows in? And now your work is a lot about changing the habitat, creating the habitat for the plants we really want to grow.
Right.
Because obviously weeds are not most of the time not the plants we want to eat,
right,
or the animals want to eat, whatever. And could you give us some perspective on how to change the habitat, or how to in the soil to go where we want to go?
Yeah. So the first step is always with testing, right? Where is the soil at right now? And I like, we're biological, so we look at it from a biological perspective. What is the living component of that soil, and how well is it functioning, and is it in the right balance for our main crop? If you're trying to grow corn, there's a particular balance of bacteria and fungi that you want in the soil. If you've got a lot of annual plants growing in your soil that you don't want, that's a different condition than what you want in the corn. So the first step is to measure and analyze what is actually happening, and then start thinking about the life cycle of those plants that are growing. Like, it's an annual weed. What is an annual weed like? It likes a particular form of nitrogen. Well, why do I have that particular form of nitrogen more than what the corn likes? Because corn and annual weeds like different things. So it's biological, it's chemical, and you start thinking about, how do I improve my biology? And there's lots of tools, and so there's so many tools. A couple of examples is compost extracts, things that you can either introduce biology, introduce organic matter. There's different types of fertilizers you can use that don't encourage weeds. So one of the big problems with the history of fertilizers, just a brief history. Over-fertilization is the reason we have so many weeds, because that fertilizer, especially nitrogen, gets converted in the soil. Whatever form you put it on the ground, it gets converted by the biochemical processes. If you don't have good, healthy soil with good organic matter and lots of biology, it gets converted into a form that maybe is more appropriate for the weed. So nitrite. One of the other things that outcomes we talked about earlier is nitrous oxide. Urea applied to the soil when an anaerobic condition in the soil, reduced oxygen, will convert some of that nitrogen into nitrous oxide, and just whoosh right up into the atmosphere. Because that's part of the process of the nitrogen cycle. So we want good aerobic, healthy soil, good organic matter, lots of good biology. And when you have that, you don't need as much fertilizer, if you need any at all. And so you're not over-fertilizing, so the weeds don't grow, and you're not getting that form of nitrogen being produced. You get a more natural form of nitrogen produced in the soil around the root system. So using different types of fertilizer products can help with that. And then building soil. I've created some products, so, a commercial plug. earthfort, part of my whole agenda has been to create products that help change the soil, to build the soil, deal with salt buildup, deal with inorganic fertilizers that are trapped in the soil, also feeding and stimulating the microbes to help them do their job of eating those nutrients and making it available to the plants. And that can be a really great tool in the process of rebuilding the soil and getting it back to a more balanced system, and it all depends, and it's all kind of customized based on the conditions in the soil and the what you're growing. So, but we have some nice products that can help with that as well. So, there's some tools that can help, but I think that it's important for a farmer who's going to move into regenerative to realize that if they only follow the current practices that are being promoted, like by the USDA, it could take 20 to 30 years for that farm to become regenerative in that level. And that's the experience that we see, is if all you do is no-till and cover crop and rotational practice, then it could take a long time for those things to really start making a difference in the soil. But you can accelerate that process. And that's really kind of where I come in, is to try and get them to 2 to 3 year level of change, get some immediate change, and then work with them on adjusting their fertility inputs and trying to help them adopt these practices in a way that makes sense for them, and then giving them some tools. So, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful to hear that there are products available to accelerate the process.
Yeah, not in Europe.
Not yet.
Not in Europe. Not yet. Not yet in Europe.
Not yet in Europe.
But yeah.
Working on that.
Yes.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah,
because it's important to see the process, of course, and to see that there are tools available to help. That it brings hope to people. If there are products available. I see this in medicine as well, just to have medical stuff available that can help people pretty fast to lower the symptoms. They can take easier care about themselves and about their bodies. So it's
and I do approach the tools that we have as medicine for the soil. That's a way I approach the products, is because once you get the soil to a certain point, it can start taking care of itself. And I would say that that's regenerative, that we rebuild the soil function so that it can manage its own condition, right, and start functioning again. The problem is that there's human beings involved, and we're as good as we get, as amazing as we may get at taking care of the soil and building it and everything, we still have to harvest. We still have to plant, and we have to drive over it, and we're adding water to the system. We're still putting some fertility down, because you can't, the soil can't always provide everything, so you need a little help. So you get to a maintenance level where it may be intensive for a few years, and then you just do a gentle approach to maintain it. And the less is best.
It's also good for the human being, to less work to do.
Yeah, it's less work for the farmer in the long run.
More time to do the stuff.
Yeah,
you really want
more
to do.
Time to research the potential problems that they might be having. And honestly, the clients we have that get to that point end up they just don't have a lot of work to do. They can put down a planting, and take care of it, just real nominal amount of inputs, and they don't have to worry about disease or weeds or any of that kind of stuff. And there's always something that may happen, but it builds resilience when you've got the soil functioning like that. It can be very resilient, and it can adapt better. If you just have a system where you're just feeding it chemicals all the time, you run out of water before before anything else, to feed it. So stop feeding the plants and feed the soil, and you're going to have a closer to an idea of regenerative.
The idea of self-regulation there as well, and the self-healing capacity of the soil, like with the human body, to get into this potential, or tap into this potential too. Because we are biological organisms, the soil itself as it is.
Definitely, yeah.
And to bring this forth again, this point of view, or this reality, so to speak.
Yeah.
There lies a wonderful future ahead of, as we all see and feel as human beings, that we are just biological organisms, and to really be able to act this out in our normal life. And having this communicated with farmers is pretty helpful as well, because once the foundation is able to act in this reality that we are biological organisms, and to act on the soil like that, and with the whole surrounding, it's a different energy from the ground up for the whole society.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's pretty easy to put effort.
It's pretty easy.
It's pretty easy, and also to put effort, to be motivated to put effort into this topic.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. Oh, it's great.
It is. what's your history on all that what you're doing? What's what motivates you? Was there a certain event in your life that really got you going?
Yeah. It was so 30 years ago. My wife and I were just married. So actually next year is our 30th anniversary. So it's almost 30 years ago. We decided that we wanted to do the Peace Corps and go and work in Africa, right? And so she has a bachelor's degree in agriculture with an emphasis on international agricultural development. I got a degree in technology. So when something happened with Peace Corps and we weren't able to do it, and we were both very sad about that, but it just didn't work out. So, and this was before I was working with my company and everything. And so 10 years later, almost 10 years later, I started working in the laboratory and I said, oh, this is really interesting. I was excited about a different way of looking at agriculture, moving away from technology as the main tool for growing plants to looking at the life in the soil. I thought it was very interesting. So I started learning and self-taught. But it was pretty quick when I started working with the lab. I realized, oh, this is big, and I might be able to go to Africa. I might be able to. So I spent the next almost 20 years developing my knowledge and developing the tools so that I can go to Africa and give African farmers the knowledge and tools that they need that is not dependent on technology. It's not dependent on chemicals. Doesn't need big heavy tractors and all of this GPS equipment and all of these fancy irrigation systems and global imaging stuff and drones and all of these things, all this technology that they can't afford, right? And the average size farm in Kenya, which is where I'm working right now, it's about 2 acres. So why would a farmer invest in something like that anyways? They can do it by hand. So for the last 30 years, I've been trying to develop the tools to help African farmers. And now I find I'm there. In the meantime, I've been working with U.S. farmers, trying to get products and knowledge to European farmers as well, and learning a lot. It's a lot easier to learn about things in the U.S. and how things work. Just because I'm there, it's not easy to get to Africa. So anyways, yeah. So now I've been motivated by subsistence farmers in Africa. How do I help elevate their status, I guess, right? Because again, the economy is based on agriculture, and the largest agricultural production systems in the world are in Africa. You combine the whole continent of Africa, and it's bigger than Russia, bigger than the US, bigger than China combined. Okay, it's the one thing that people they've broken it into little pieces, and when you look at each little piece, it's like, oh, it's not that big. But in Kenya alone, I think there's 40, 50 million people live in Kenya, and at least 80% of them are directly involved with agriculture. Whereas in the U.S., we have 450 million people, and less than 1% is directly involved in agriculture, I believe. It's, maybe a little more than that, but I'd have to look up the numbers specifically. But the point is that percentage-wise, Africa is all agriculture. And being able to bring the knowledge with the testing and developing a testing kit that allows us to do real-time field testing, the only technology you need is a cell phone. I'm so happy about that. That's like the most amazing thing since I've been working on this, is that the ability to do that testing was such a simple approach, because everybody in Africa has a cell phone, or almost everybody. They may not have a meal every day, but they have a cell phone. It's just, anyways, that's another story. And then the tools. So the one of the products that we're trying to bring into Africa that we're currently testing is the Soilify, and that product goes down at a pound half a kilo per acre, which is half a hectare or half and a quarter hectare or something like that. Well, 500 grams per acre is the application rate. And so that is something that, when you look at the application rates of other types of fertilizers, inorganic, and even organic fertilizers that usually a lot higher rate, this is such a low application rate that the farmer not only can they afford it, but we can actually get it to them because they don't have to ship millions of tons of product, and it's going to help them become not only more sustainable, growing the food for their own family, but they're going to be able to, on a 2-acre farm, they'll be able to go to market, which means you can elevate. They'll be able to pay for their kids to go to school. They'll be able to pay for some electricity, some more things. So I think, my goal is to make a small holder farmer in Africa profitable. And it would do that 1 million times, and it would change the economy of West Africa. And then we in East Africa, and and I'm working in Uganda, Zambia, Tanzania, Ethiopia. I've made a contact in Gambia, which most people I didn't know. I feel bad about that, but this tiny little country over in West Africa. But so we're trying to do that, and then. So really what got me interested is the idea of reducing poverty in the world through agriculture. I've found a way to contribute and to gain knowledge and to do this thing. And so that's really, so that's the long version or longish version. I could go into more detail, but yeah, for me, that's what it's about, is helping those farmers doing my part to help them be as successful as they can be, so that they can be just make their help them do better. That's all.
Beautiful to hear. It's a big motivation for life and to going forward, and a lot of questions to ask and to a lot of patience.
Yes. Yes.
And finally, you got there.
Yes.
Seeing it happening.
Finally, we're moving forward. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could you elaborate more on the on-field testing kit you're pretty proud of now? We
created the field lab that we developed is basically it's a portable electrical conductivity and pH meter that you can test the EC and pH of a soil. Basically tells you those chemical parameters that are like real critical, real basic. If you don't have enough electrical conductivity, then that means there's not enough nutrients moving around in the soil. And if it's too high, then that means there's too much salt. So that tells us there's a range. pH, of course, is availability of nutrients, and if it's too acidic or too basic, then the microbes don't function very well. So we want to know those things because there's simple things we can do to start adjusting that, right? So that's the limit of our chemistry testing. We don't look at NPK, we don't look at micronutrients, we just look at the EC and pH. But then we've a few years ago started working with Prolific Life Sciences out of New York, and they built a device called the microbiometer. And the microbiometer is a tool that you prepare the soil. There's a process to prepare the soil, and you put a few drops on this card, and then you take a picture with your phone and image it, and it can analyze it for the bacteria and fungal density of the sample of the soil. And so then we use that information to determine, do you have enough bacteria and fungi, and is it in the right balance for the plant that you're trying to grow? And all of a sudden that used to take a lot of work on a microscope, and a very expensive microscope. And so now we're able to do that real basic testing in almost real time in the field. So you can collect a sample and do the test and say, this is where you're at. And if you've been trained, obviously there's a little bit of training involved, but that's something that we provide. And then you say, this is where you're at. These are the things you can do to improve it based on the crop, or you could change your crop based on the testing, right? So if you're trying to grow asparagus and it's better suited for tomatoes, maybe you could switch to tomatoes instead of asparagus. I don't know. So we can, either way, we can help them. So and it's all contained in a little backpack. So all the pieces you need are right there, and you can put it on your back, and you can hike to the farm. You can ride a motorcycle in Africa. You know, a lot of times it's probably going to be taking a motorcycle out to the farm and visit them. And if a 2-acre farm and you only need a couple pounds to treat the farm, you could actually have the product with you when you do the testing, show them what's going on, and then, you know, if they need the product, they can get it right then and there. And if they don't need the product, then you move on to the next farm, you know? And that's really, it's so exciting to me to have that tool, because it's just too expensive to set up the big lab. It's just accessible. You know, the whole field lab itself, with all of the pieces and everything, is only $1,000 as compared to, you know, potentially $30,000 or $40,000 for a microscope, for the right kind of microscope, you know, which you need a pretty high level microscope. So, and it doesn't, you know, as long as you can keep your cell phone charged, you've got all the tools that you need right there. It doesn't require the internet. It doesn't require a consistent power source or anything like that. So it's very accessible to anybody. And to me, you know, obviously farmers in Africa are not buying these field labs. We're providing the field labs to the government, and the government's buying them. And then we're working on a training program to train soil agronomists, so to speak, you know. And so they are going out and testing the soil for the farmers. So that's part of the program that we're trying to develop there. So
education is really important. Really important. That's what we're having. Of course, like in the US, it's easier to have this access to education and all the tools. Yeah. Also in Europe, it's easier for the Africans. You're putting this more forward to have the knowledge and the tools available to.
Yeah. So we're going to Africa and we're training. So we're working with a nonprofit that specializes in adult education. So we're training farmers to be trainers of farmers. So I train a small group of farmers once, and then they become the teachers of the next group. And so they can spread very rapidly.
It's a very interesting idea also for European farmers and for farmers here in Germany. I feel for everywhere that the knowledge is spread in between. Yeah. And also to the younger generation, to coming younger people
absolutely.
in there.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is that we're working with youth. The average age of Kenya is 30 for the whole population. It's a very young population. So we have to work with the youth because that's what is there, but they're very enthusiastic. And it's teaching them skills and creating jobs. So not only are we helping farmers, but we're also helping youth that otherwise might not have opportunity. So it's all about creating jobs and creating wealth, you know, creating prosperity, you know, and all based on agriculture.
Okay, I just wondered how to end this conversation, and you gave just a perfect ending. I feel just creating wealth, prosperity, and creating opportunity for human beings to live a life they want to, in a sense of living it in a like for me, what I phrase it, in a grounded way of living on Earth.
Yeah,
Mother
absolutely.
Earth, where we live right now, just to make a better living here.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
Thank you, Matt.
Oh,
for talking to me.
Thank you.
Ich denke, ich danke an alle, die zugehört haben. Ich freue mich dann darauf, dass ihr dann auch wieder zuschaltet. Ihr kennt das Prozedere mit dem Daumen nach oben, mit dem Kanal abonnieren und eines der anderen Videos schauen, die ja schon online sind und sich einfach auf das nächste auch freuen. Und genau, bis dahin. Und wir sprechen and we'll talk again probably soon. Bye bye.